Ladies and gentlemen, we've got David Bruce back with us today. He was with us yesterday talking about who wrote the Secret Doctrine, and today he's going to be helping us with other aspects of our learning and discovery about the Secret Doctrine. So hello and welcome to our workshop. I'm Ron Karsten, Director of Public Programs for the Theosophical Society in Portland. And about David, just briefly, he's a third-generation Theosophist from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In 2003, after working more than 20 years in the field of electronics distribution, he was hired as the Director of Education at the National Center of the Theosophical Society in Wheaton, Illinois. He's also an author of a newly released book, Serving a Higher Purpose, and it's published by Quest Books in Wheaton on the Theosophical campus. He's delivered many lectures and workshops to the Theosophical groups around the country. And when he's traveling, or excuse me, when he's not traveling, he's there at home and supervises the Society's prison program, helping to educate prisoners through a variety of correspondence courses. We're pleased to have him here with us today to talk about navigating the Secret Doctrine. So here's David.
Thank you, Ron, and hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Good to be here. Most of you heard my talk yesterday, but this will be a different type of format today. Yesterday, I think I did most of the talking, but we've called this a workshop, which means that we're going to have conversation together, okay? I don't want to be the only one talking. So before we start, though, on something, well, before we start on the Secret Doctrine, I thought it would be useful, if you don't mind, that we have a couple moments of silence, and then I'll close that silence out with the invocation. You know what it is, O Hidden Life. So why don't we just take a few minutes? I think we're all seated, position ourselves in our chairs, back erect, and take a few slow, deep breaths. Take another deep breath. Let your eyes close. Relax. Let go of any thoughts that may still be dancing around in your mind, things that you did this morning, maybe thoughts of things you have to do later. Just let that all go. Just be present right here in the now. And let us all try to feel a sense of unity, a sense of harmony, so that we have a fruitful session together. and I will recite the invocation, after which we can return and open our eyes. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom, O hidden light, shining in every creature, O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May all who feel themselves as one with thee know they are therefore one with every other. Thank you. All right. Again, welcome everybody. It would help, I think it would be helpful for all of us if we go around, not to introduce, most of you know each other, but maybe Ron, if you don't mind, we'll start with you. Just a few words from everybody on whether they have actually attempted to read some of the Secret Doctrine. If not, that's okay. But if you have attempted to read it or spent some time, I think we'd like to know what was your experience with that. So Ron, would you be a sport and start off?
Gladly, with my muffled. So I have the privilege of being a third generation Theosophist. My family has always made its residence here in the Northwest. I am father of two children who have chosen not to pay too much attention to my beliefs. And perhaps at some time I'll be able to enlighten them. And David, Mom and Dad left me the Blavatsky, Bassan. And anyway, I have a wonderful library as a result of the third generation benefits. So I'm good to go, Dave. I've got the material, and man, I'm afloat, adrift in the sea of the B words.
Thank you.
All right, sir, go ahead.
Betty, would you care, Betty Rogers?
I first read the Secret Doctrine when I was quite young. I was by myself. I didn't know of any groups at that time. And I didn't understand a lot of it. I thought it was exciting to read it. And then I started looking for a lodge, which I found when I came out to Portland. And I was part of a long-term Secret Doctrine group in the 1970s. So that's my background. I've referred to it occasionally on specific topics.
Okay, so you found it exciting.
It was. This was like 1970, perhaps, and I had found a book of Madame Blavatsky's The Key to Theosophy in our public library. And there in the back, it talked about the Theosophical Society in Wheaton. And so I wrote them and ordered my own copy of the Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled.
Okay, wonderful. Sheila, would you care to say anything?
Hi, everybody. Well, my parents had the Secret Doctrine in their bedroom. I guess they were studying it. We were living in Wheaton at the time at the headquarters in a little house on the property. And I picked it up a couple times wondering what it was and put it back down. And then in high school, we moved, and I picked it up and I read a couple passages, figured it was too serious, and it wasn't for me at that time. So I put it back down, and I have never studied it.
Okay.
I've been curious, but it's going to take a lot of effort to get through it. And so I'll take it in bits and pieces with other people so I have encouragement.
Yeah. I think I mentioned yesterday, my mother was a really good theosophist for 40, 50 years. She never read the Secret Doctrine. And so, Wallace.
I've been a member of the Theosophical Society for over 30 years, and I've never read the Secret Doctrine, I will confess. My first introduction to it was in the Portland Lodge when there was that long-standing group that met for about 10 years. And they were the kind of the esoteric group. They'd go upstairs to their classroom when we had classes. And my first introduction to Blavatsky was actually the Isis Unveiled. We studied it in our lodge, and it took me over a month of trying and just beating my head against her odd way of writing. And all of a sudden one day I realized Blavatsky's got a wicked sense of humor. She has got a wicked sense of humor. And once I understood that, it like opened it up. And one last thing I'd say is if anybody is attempting these things, I would recommend Pablo Sender's book, Evolution of the Higher Consciousness. Just the preface, because he talks about the way Blavatsky wrote, and it's the first time I've ever heard it put this way, and it's pretty good. Thank you.
That's a good book, Wallace. I've read that myself. It's called The Evolution of Higher Consciousness, I believe, and it's Pablo Sender is the author. It's available through Full Hot Publishing, or Full Hat, yeah, I think Full Hot Publishing, FOHAT. Full Hot is one of the terms from the Secret Doctrine. So who else? We don't need to go around. We have more people now. Anybody else want to add something to that in terms of their initial reaction, if they've read it, how they felt? Go ahead, just speak.
I just want to mention that Pablo Sender has beautiful videos on YouTube available there. Introduction to the Secret Doctrine, beautiful presentation. That's all. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thanks for that. I was going to mention that later, but you beat me to it, so that's good. Anybody else?
Yeah, I just want to say one thing. I guess well, it isn't going to be pretty, but I'll put the video on. That
You look marvelous, darling, marvelous. Show.
There was that humongous 10-year journey at the lodge, which was intimidating, and they didn't really encourage new members to walk into the middle of their group, but we did study it again a couple years ago, and we, like Wallace said, we started with Isis Unveiled, and then we went on and did the Secret Doctrine, and I think we spent 2 years at least going through it. But the reason that I bring that up is because I never would have attempted it on my own, and I think a lot of people get intimidated. Betty kind of alluded to that. But we all really felt that if we did it together, we could get something really good out of it. So, I would recommend, if you can find a study group online or, something like that where other people are moving along with you, then it's not as intimidating. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned that word. I think yesterday I told the group, when I first started looking at this was back in my high school days, much younger, intimidating. that was my feeling, confusion. And then later, when I really decided I need to start digging into it, I had the feeling of frustration, not, understand, so all those feelings. I didn't find it exciting quite yet, but later on I did. So anyway, that's the kind of book it is. And I would not recommend it for new members. I never have. I consider that to be an advanced book. So I think if you start pushing that on a relatively new member, I think you're making a mistake. There are much easier books to deal with, much more readily accessible books, commentaries, let's say, like Pablo's book that Wallace mentioned. So,
May I add just a little comment here?
yes,
would
who
like-
is it? Uh-huh.
I would like to say that, this book, The Secret Doctrine, is
Oh.
it is the most plagiarized book ever.
Oh.
How many people made a lucrative living by cutting and pasting pieces from it everywhere?
Yeah.
So, it's the most plagiarized. The whole New Age movement is built on it.
Yeah.
People have just taken pieces out of context and out of everything and just ran to the bank with it. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I don't know if I could add to it. I think for me, like I actually studied the Secret Doctrine before I joined the TS. And that was something from what Wallace was saying, was just her wicked sense of humor was super sharp. And it was just, that's kind of my love language. So when I was hearing her explain all this in like cosmogenesis and anthropogenesis, like I was just like, okay, I feel right at home. And so it took me 5 years to finally join the TS, but I'm quite serious about it.
Well, that's good to hear. Yeah. So what I'm going to do now is read from some passages from John Algiel's study guide, which I'm going to recommend to anybody who really wants to get into the Secret Doctrine. Here it is. It's a paper copy. It's about 65 pages. It sells from Quest Books for $8.95, and it's called Getting Acquainted with the Secret Doctrine. A very useful book. It helped me a tremendous amount. And John Algiel has such a way of making complicated ideas very clear and understandable. So I'm going to read verbatim some of the things he said as to why it's such a darn difficult book. Why is it so frustrating or intimidating? So here's what he says. First, the book's vision of the universe and of the role humanity has to play in the cosmic process is both sweeping and profound. The knowledge of its author ranged over a vast number of subjects. The book is indeed breathtaking in its scope. That's number one. It covers a lot of ground and is very deep. That's number one. Second reason, because the book was written more than a century ago, about 130 some years ago, much of its discussion on science, religion, and philosophy is dated. And you'll see that in the science section is dated. Back to John's words now. Yet the basic issues it treats are perennial. And the scientific, religious, and philosophical principles it addresses are as vital today as they were more than 100 years ago. Number three, this has to do with the style, the way it's written. Third, ideas are thrown out for the reader's consideration, often without a full explanation. The reader has to recognize the seminal ideas, that's the key ideas, and grasp the implications they have for the way we see ourselves and the world we live in. Fourth, and the last one here, The organization of subjects in the book is often haphazard, and the style of explication alternately elliptical and repetitive. So, yeah, it's Blavatsky was many things. She had many talents, but she was not. Organization was not one of them. Okay, she was a great a fount of knowledge. She had all these abilities. She had great courage, but she was not a person to organize things. If you read about the years when she was actually doing the manuscripts by hand, she would have these piles of papers on her desk and she would be writing by hand. And finally, when she felt the manuscripts were ready for publication, she had to bring in a number of people, the Kiteleys and others, and they tried to organize it. So she did not determine the layout that it was published in 18, originally over 100 years ago. That the papers that she wrote those for sure, but the organization, I'm sure she had input to it, but other people tried to make better sense of how to organize it. So John closes this out. This is the last from that little section of John's study guide. The Secret Doctrine is not an orderly book, yet it is a book about the order of the cosmos. So overwhelming in its vision and implications that generations of readers have found it repays whatever efforts of study they have put into it. It will take effort if you choose to do so. Again, I'm not suggesting that you should or have to, but if you have an interest, if you feel drawn towards this book, if you think it's something you want to do, know that it'll take a long time over a period of time. It's not a book you're going to read in 3 weeks. It's something you return to time and time again. You can read a big novel, Herman Melville, John Steinbeck, some other, you can read that in a few weeks if you stick with it and get through it. Can't do that with this book. You can read Isis Unveiled pretty much straight, or The Key to Theosophy. You can't do that with this book. And that's what I'm going to share with you. These are ideas from other people, mainly of John Elgiel's, who I think had some of the best suggestions. Now let me go to, I think at this point I can pull up my PowerPoint. And let's go here. There we go. All right, everybody can see that?
Yes.
Okay, good, good. And let me minimize this here on the side. There we go, pull that up. All right. Why go through all that? Well, these are just a few things to keep in mind. It's essentially an inner experience. And I'll explain why in a little bit. Being an inner experience, it means that we have to navigate our inner world. But the payoff is by gaining knowledge of ourselves, we gain knowledge of the cosmos. I'm sure you've all heard the Hermetic Axiom, as above, so below. And it has also been paraphrased that man, the human being, is a microcosm of the macrocosm. So each human being is like a little universe, which is a reflection of the greater cosmos. As we probe the secrets of the Secret Doctrine and come to gain a greater understanding of those cosmic facts, we also, as a correspondence, according to the law of correspondences, we discover something about ourselves. And isn't that what it's all about? Know thyself. We come here into this world, into this incarnation, and the theosophical view, which I think many of you subscribe to, is that essentially it's a learning process. We're all learners. It's a process of growth. And we have the idea of rebirth, death, rebirth, death, part of a long ongoing process. And along that road, we gradually are able to transform ourselves into more spiritual creatures, more kind, compassionate people. We gain a greater understanding of ourselves and the people around us. So what we're going to do today, what I hope to do, and I have to keep an eye on the clock here because I tend to, how to study it. We'll look at some key passages and of course discussion, we'll do that too. This, I'm going to skip over this fairly briefly because I showed you this little snippet yesterday. The purpose, and this comes right from the preface of the Secret Doctrine, to show that nature is not a fortuitous concurrence of atoms. What does that mean? And by nature, she means the visible physical plane, the manifested universe. And fortuitous means by chance. It's not a random throwing of the dice. And some people subscribe to that theory. But that is not part of the wisdom tradition. We see the universe as purposeful, and it is guided by certain laws. Secondly, to rescue certain archaic truths which have been lost. These truths are the basis of all the religions, whether Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, what have you. And they tend to get lost for different reasons, but just over time, things tend to fall by the wayside. For example, referring to an old religion that is essentially a dead religion, even though there are still adherents, but very, very tiny number of people. Zoroastrianism, that was a thriving religion at one time. But like all things, they have a birth, a flowering period to maturity, and then a slow decline, and then a death. And this is true not only for animals, people, but also for institutions and religions. However, their period of influence could extend hundreds, if not thousands of years. But everything still, even a star or a galaxy, it does come to an end at some point. And then this last purpose, again from the preface, to show that the occult, which means the hidden side of nature, she's not talking here about what scientists see in the laboratory through their instruments. She's talking much, much deeper than that. But I will say, and as you know, keep in mind this was written 130 years ago, before the 20th century even began. A lot has happened with science since that time. We didn't have quantum physics back then and all those things. So science has changed. You now have things like Kirlian photography and so on and so forth, and we know so much more. But at that time, this was very, very true. So again, this is back to John's book. Most of you have met John or know John. He was the president from 93, I think, to 2000 of the American Theosophical Society. Again, this is kind of recapping what I said. The purpose is not to teach a doctrine that was once kept secret, in which she, for the first time, revealed. No, it is rather to lead the reader, that's you and I and others, to discover a truth that is beyond all doctrines, an ultimate truth that is secret only because it can't be put into words. So in the third line, the end there, leading the reader, leading us to discover. That's why it's an inner experience. One of the reasons why it's an inner experience. This is a journey of discovery. Now, you might want to jot these down, but this information is in John's workbook, which you can get for under $10. This is what he outlined as the best procedure to tackle this humongous text. Start off first with the 3 fundamental propositions. They are found on pages 13 to 20. That one there, of course, is volume 1. After you've spent some time meditating on that and letting it sink in. Don't just, if you're going to do it, don't just read it quickly and then go flip the page. You got to savor the words here. You got to let it reverberate within your higher consciousness. You have to be patient, not impatient. Then you go to the summing up section. You see way at 272. So a lot has happened in those 250 pages. But then she has a neat little section summing up. That's well worth reading. It covers 6 pages. Now, if you're going to approach Anthropogenesis, Volume 2, start off with the preliminary notes and then the conclusion. So those are some suggestions which will help you, shall I say, get your feet on the ground. I can't think of a good metaphor. So here we are, a little discussion now. In what way, I want to hear from you on this, okay? And I'm going to stop the screen share. The title, The Secret Doctrine. Think about that for a minute. That's actually kind of paradoxical, right? In what way, anybody have a inkling as to why that just the title in itself is somewhat paradoxical?
It doesn't sound so much different than Jesus' explanation of his parables to his disciples. For you, it is given to know the secret of these parables, and for them out there, not so much. You have to show that you're really interested in wanting to know these things.
Okay. Well, we also, speaking of that, we also know that I think it's in Matthew, Jesus said he told his disciples that, to the outer masses, the great, numbers of people, he spoke in parables, but to you, to his closest disciples, he gave a deeper level of explanation, because Buddha did the same thing. The Buddha did the same thing. And that, I think that's any great teacher will do that. Well, let's go back to that. I'm going to go back to the screen share. Whoops, there we are. So, yeah, second question. What is the meaning? Think about what the word doctrine means. Doctrine. A doctrine is something that is generally known, right? You have church, the Catholic Church has its doctrines. You have in the world of international affairs, like I'm trying to think of something, the Truman Doctrine. In military affairs, you have military doctrine. So a doctrine, let me go back to that screen there, show you another. See down below, an idea or a concept. Those are other words that sometimes when we're speaking casually, we interchange those ideas, but we don't use doctrine. But idea, concept, to me, an idea can be like, I have an idea. I think I'd like to go take a walk in the park. I think I'll take my dog for a walk. Or I think I have an idea. I think I'd like to have pepperoni pizza for supper. But a concept, you wouldn't say, I have a concept. I'd like to go get pizza or spaghetti. No, concept implies something a little more deeper, a little more developed, but it could just be something mentally that you developed, or it could be something that a number of people have worked on over a period of time. But a doctrine, now here's the difference. Keep in mind the title of the book is talking about a secret doctrine.
Is it
Go ahead.
Is it okay to use the word worldview?
No, worldview, that's, no, that would be something a little different. But that's, a worldview is based upon an understanding of these doctrines. So in short, a doctrine is something that has been developed by usually with people with pretty good intellects, and it has been debated over periods of time, sometimes centuries, and kind of like, I'm trying to think of an example. anyway, it's something that ideas that have been fine-tuned over a period of time. One that just pops into mind, I don't know why. There's something in the Christian Catholic Church known as the just war doctrine. That started way hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and different thinkers, Thomas Aquinas and others, added their thoughts. And so anyway, what we're dealing here is with the ageless wisdom tradition. The title refers to the fact that there are certain ideas that qualify as being doctrines because deep thinking, illuminated people have developed those ideas and then re-verified them and re-verified them, and they elevate them to a status of not just an idea or a concept, but an actual doctrine, which means it's accepted widely by people in that community. So the term secret doctrine has actually a threefold meaning. It refers, number one, to the book, obviously. And usually, when you're in writing, you have a book, it's in italics, it's italics instead of Roman. But it also, in the book itself and her other writings, sometimes she refers to the secret doctrine, she's referring not to the book, but to the actual body of teachings. And then there's a third use, which you'll come across, where she's referring to the highest truth in those doctrines, which is beyond ability to express in words. And we'll get back to that. I'll circle back to that a little bit later, okay? Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so in the beginning of the book, there's a section called the Preface by HPB, but then it's followed by the Proem. And it starts, this is the important section, you'll find it. The secret doctrine establishes three fundamental propositions. What is a proposition? What is the significance of the word establishes? See? So you got proposition, you have to understand the significance. And for example, if she had not, what about the word fundamental? So if she had said the secret doctrine establishes three fundamental truths, that's different from saying proposition, right? Because a proposition is what? It's a proposal, right? Here's something for your consideration. But when you say, here's a truth, it might come with this idea too that you better believe it because I say so. So she presents it in a way that's not authoritarian, if I can say that way. But she uses the word establishes, not saying presents. When you say you're going to establish something, like in a court of law, a prosecuting attorney says, I'm going to establish that this person is a no good so-and-so. He's going to lay out the case, all the evidence, right? And hopefully convince the jury. In this huge book, The Secret Doctrine establishes, by using their word, she means I'm going to lay out the evidence for you. And God, does she do it? I mean, remember yesterday I said there's like 1,147 citations? That's the evidence. That's what she does. She lays it out for the reader. She's not just saying, trust me because I know what I'm talking about. She's presenting all, and that, by the way, all that evidence is where you can get lost in the weeds. And fundamental means seminal, it's basic. It's really primal. So here's the first one. It's a lot of words, and I'm just selecting part of it. I'll read through this. An omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle on which all speculation is impossible, since it transcends the power of human conception. That's our mind, right? It transcends that and could only be dwarfed by any human expression or similitude. In other words, any intellectual thing we could say about that omnipresent, eternal, boundless, immutable principle could only shrink it. there's no words that we could come up with in any language that would do justice to it. And then finally she says, this reality, it's beyond the range and reach of thought. In the words of the Mandukya Upanishad, unthinkable and unspeakable. So the easy question first, the third one, is she talking about something that is personalized? No, Sheila Shea, obviously not. It's actually kind of abstract, a principle. That's an abstract thing, right? But in most religions, now Theosophy is not a religion, but generally, when people are looking to answers about life through religion, they have to have something they can relate to. So God is personified. The Lord is, Jehovah, or whatever, Brahma is personified. But that's not, the actual reality is way beyond that. This personification is kind of a crutch for human minds to deal with something that is so vast, boundless, immutable. Immutable means what? What's the word immutable mean? Unchanging. Our whole experience in this incarnation with this 5 senses of this physical body is with things that are constantly changing. Everything is changing. The only difference is the rate of speed with which they change. So we're talking about something that is totally outside human experience, but it's not outside the spirit's experience. But we're embedded in this material world. We've kind of got spiritual amnesia by being thrust into this physical body. We've kind of lost touch with those higher realms. And so, where was I? I'm starting to bloviate and lose. Oh yeah. So it's really not something that can be talked about. Words are best used to point towards it, to indicate the direction to go. But at some point, you have to leave the words behind. And all the great mystics, John of the Cross, Teresa of it, they all resort to not words, but poetry or paradox, because words just fall short. And they'll take you so far, but you have to experience it for yourself. And that experience might just be a brief flash. It does not last. It does not last. But even though it's a brief experience, it can have a profound impact on your life. Now, look at this, just to refresh your memory, this eternal, boundless. Now, you can't talk about it. It's beyond the range of human expression. Let's look at the Tao Te Ching. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. That is, in a short, abbreviated way, that's basically what you get right here. The same thing, except she uses much more flowery and flowing language. But this short little passage from the Tao Te Ching, most of you have heard that, it's not the name. The name is not the thing. So the second proposition, and these are the things that you should, again, I'm going over this because John Elgill says this is what you should first live with. Go back to this, maybe for weeks, to really let it soak in. The eternity of the universe in toto as a boundless plane. Periodically the playground of numberless universes, incessantly manifesting and disappearing. The appearance and disappearance of worlds is like a regular tidal ebb of flux and reflex. Some of these words might need a little explanation. In total, that's a Latin word meaning on the whole or entirely, the eternity of the universe for the whole shebang. Periodically means at regular intervals. Incessantly means without interruption. So what you see, and modern astronomers know this now, stars come, they disappear. But over billions of years. But they can tell that there are dead stars, dwarf stars, black holes, and things like that. And so it's a constant dance, a big drama over unimaginable periods of time. And we are on this one little small planet in this little tiny solar system in the Milky Way. And flux and reflux, that's, the ocean. You stand by the seashore, you see, that's the best analogy. Just stand by the ocean and watch those waves come in, hear them crash, and then they go out. It's kind of hypnotic. I've always felt that when I stood by Lake Michigan and just stood there for a while, it's there's something transcendent about it. It's just something mystical almost. So continuing, the second assertion, in other words, the second proposition, the second assertion of the Secret Doctrine is the absolute universality of that law of periodicity, meaning cyclicity, or flux and reflux, ebb and flow, which physical science has observed and recorded in all departments of nature. In other words, this is all about cycles. There are cycles occurring everywhere. So absolute universality means everywhere without exception. That means this takes place not only in the solar system, not only in the movement of the stars, but in the human body, in men's affairs, all in culture, in art. And so this is a law of a divine law of period. It's just built into the fabric of reality. It's not like man-made laws, which can be changed, which are sometimes erroneous or fickle. These existed from the very beginning of the cosmos, and they will continue to exist. Finally, she wraps this up with an alternation, such as that of day and night, life and death, sleeping and waking, is a fact so common, so perfectly universal, and without exception, that it is easy to comprehend that in it we see one of the absolutely fundamental laws of the universe. You'd have to be sleeping under a rock not to notice. I mean, it's so convincing, and it's so true. It's really not open to debate, this that you see these things going. So let's just, well, you can debate it. I mean, I'm not saying you have to. We have freedom of thought, right, in the society. So how about some cycles occurring in nature or the human body? Let's just, you guys throw out in human affairs, let's just throw out a few. I'll start off with I used to do a lot of investing, preparing for my old age. Stock markets have bull markets, bear markets, right? Up and down, cycles, right? What's some other cycles? How about the human body? There's a lot going on inside there. How about the circulation of the blood?
My first thought was on the circadian rhythms or the biorhythms, or, everything about our body has to do with rhythms and cycles, and some days you're up, some days you're down.
Exactly. Yeah, some days I go to the gym and you just don't have it. Other days you got all the energy in the world. You're doing more reps, and yeah, or just in a broad sense, we're active for, I don't know, 12 hours or so, 18 hours. Then we have to go rest. That's when we sleep. The body needs rest. Some other, it doesn't have to just be biology. What are some other?
To me, everything is a cycle. For instance, corporations, if you take that as a very concrete one, it starts out with a germ in that brain, then it's put on paper, and then it's put into the outer world, and then it goes through maturity, it goes through old age, and then it dies, which is where Boeing is at right now, and things like that. The body, it's a seed. The heart starts beating, then the brain and the intestines split off from one cell, and then the body's born and it dies, and then it becomes dirt. Everything's a cycle.
Yeah.
Everything's circular.
Yes. The one difference, though, since you did that circle, I should point out cyclicity or periodicity. It's different from repetition. They look similar, but if you look at the bark on the tree, go to Sequoia National Park, and if you were to look at those trees that are hundreds of years old and look at the rings, you can tell whether there was a drought in a certain year or not by the rings. And so repetition is like a hamster going around, or a machine in a factory doing the same thing, making widgets over and over. Nothing changes. But cycles, although there is repetition, like with the tree, you have the winter, springs, that part repeats, but there's differences within that overall repetition, which is cycles. And with the human beings, you could say the circle of life and death: come back, you die, come back, you die. But it's not just, we're not a hamster on a little wheel. We're learning and growing, and each time is better. You're learning more, so there's growth. So that is cyclicity and periodicity. We won't, it's pretty obvious, I think. Let's,
I guess
ahead.
maybe to say like to connect those two, it's like repetition would be almost kind of like a child of cycles, as far as like, it's an idea, but it comes from some sort of parent source. And so you're talking about something a little bit higher than something else. Yeah,
Jake. How about music? A good artist, a good musician, let's say it's with a vocalist, okay? Or it could be a saxophone or whatever. Like in jazz music, let's take jazz for example. They'll play the first chorus, the melody is put out there, but they repeat it again, but they don't do it exactly the same, because that would be kind of boring. So maybe the second time they change some of the chords, they make a little twist to the rhythm. That's what makes it interesting.
Yeah, like that's the expression of something that's inner.
Yeah. So thank you. Okay, so we did that. Oh, now the third one is a long one, but I need to read this here. This is one you really, and I'm just showing you a short excerpt from it. Believe me, it's the fundamental identity of all souls with the universal oversoul. Oh, okay. That's you know where that term oversoul comes from? Probably not. You might. You know who coined that word? Ralph Waldo Emerson. He has actually, in his essays, you can go online, there's one called The Oversoul. So all souls with the oversoul, the latter meaning the universal oversoul, being itself an aspect of the unknown root. There she goes, throwing out those mystical terms. And the obligatory pilgrimage for every soul. Plato used it in one of his dialogues. Plato used that term, the obligatory pilgrimage. Through the whole cycle of incarnation or necessity, in accordance with cyclic and karmic law, during the whole term, the pivotal doctrine, this is like pivotal, meaning really very important, of the esoteric philosophy admits no privileges or special gifts in man, save those won by his own ego, that's the higher self, through personal effort and merit, through a long series of metempsychosis and reincarnations. Now, statements like this are why back in Blavatsky's days, she was so strongly opposed by the church. You can see why if you look at this. Because the church, a Christian, at least in the Christian church, no, you don't save yourself by personal efforts. You have to have a redeemer, a savior, right? Personal effort is good, but you just have to believe and have faith and accept the Christ. So my sister, who's a pretty Orthodox Christian, she would definitely not agree with that. She would also say that people have gifts, and how many times do you watch a basketball game or a football game after the game? Somebody who played really well just says, oh, I have to thank the Lord for the gifts, my talent, whether it's Michael Jordan or Aaron Rodgers, whoever, thank the Lord, like it's given to you gratuitously. Well, then the comeback is, well, okay, the good Lord is supposed to be just and impartial. How come the good Lord gives presents? How come Ron is so good looking and I look like a schmuck? You know, it's not fair. Ron is a good looking guy and look at me. I have to put a tie on to look halfway decent. You know, and some people have intellectual capabilities and others are dull. Their minds are slow. Some have artistic abilities. Some have, it's, you know, that's a very confusing, most Christians have a hard time answering that, saying it's the will of God. You can believe that if that makes you feel good, but I think there's a lot of problems with it, but I think the esoteric or theosophy, the ageless wisdom, if you accept the idea that we come back again and again, we earn these gifts through personal effort and a long series of reincarnations. And if you wrap your head around that, things make a lot more sense. Oh, this term unknown root, that's, you know, Blavatsky plays around with terms. She does not want to get stuck with terminology like somebody, a chemist or, you know, or a lawyer. And she does that for a reason. But this unknown root, that refers back to that first principle, which is omnipresent, boundless. And each soul, you and I, we have a fundamental identity with that ultimate reality. That's our highest spirit. The Hindus would say Atma. And in theosophical literature, you'll read that the reincarnating ego or the higher self is Atma, Buddhi, Manas, meaning a spirit, and then the connecting link, Buddhi, and then the higher mind, the part that is part of our immortal reincarnating soul. We have the higher mind and the lower mind. So anyway, there's a lot of things you can look at in these passages. And then this is from later on, page 43. This is an important statement. Oh my gosh, yeah, we are getting to break time, right, Tom? I mean, Ron?
3 minutes and counting.
All right. Let me just read through these. The Secret Doctrine teaches the progressive development of everything, worlds as well as atoms. Wow. Worlds as well, everything. This stupendous development has neither conceivable beginning nor imaginable end. And in the Western view, we have the idea of history as a straight line, you know, the Big Bang if you're a scientist, or if according to Genesis, God created the world here and then we're all headed towards the end, a straight line. But the Eastern religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, it's more of a circular, cyclical thing, which to me makes a heck of a lot more sense. And the fact that it never ends, that's actually kind of exciting. That's very exciting to me. And then this speaks to this idea how we grow. We begin to understand more. As we rise in the scale of development, that's our inner development, we perceive, see, it's all about understanding. We perceive that during the stages through which we have passed, we mistook shadows for realities. We look at shadows and we think, oh, that's the real thing. And then a little later we mature, or maybe many years later, we realize, oh, you know what? That's just an appearance. That's not what I thought it was. So this upward progress that we go through is a series of progressive awakenings to higher consciousness. I think Pablo talks about that very well in his book. So, and here's another statement that my sister, oh my God, she would definitely not, that's why she looks skeptically at me like I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble with the Lord. Yes, sir. Esoteric philosophy teaches that everything lives and is conscious. She would not accept that. She'd say, yeah, a dog is conscious. We used to live on a farm. We had horses. She knew that. But not, going back to the statement, but not that all life and consciousness are similar to those of human or even animal beings. Yeah, I'm going to stop right there. So this is a big difference in the wisdom tradition. There really is no inanimate object. There are things that appear to be inanimate, but you take plants, for example. flowers, plants. I don't know if some of you are familiar with the book published, I think in 1978, late 70s, The Secret Life of Plants by Peter Tompkin. Wonderful little book. Wallace is shaking his head. The Secret Life of Plants. And part of that, a chapter in that book, he talks about an Indian biologist, Jagadish Bose, B-O-S-E, Jagadish Bose, lived in the latter half of the 19th century and died somewhere around 2035 or so. He did, way back then, he did experiments hooking up electrodes to plants, and he determined, that there's a consciousness there. I can't explain now because it's been years and years, but you go read that book if you're interested, and you will find out this is amazing stuff. And it just supports that statement I showed you from Blavatsky that everything is conscious. But it's a different kind of consciousness. It's a different kind. Just like a Mahatma's consciousness is going to be different from ours. The consciousness of a Buddha or a saint is different. But it's a quantum leap from the animal kingdom to the human kingdom, because from everything we can tell, we have something animals don't have, and that is self-consciousness, self-awareness. That's a huge leap. Animals have this kind of group consciousness. That's why when you see a flock of birds in the sky doing these wonderful maneuvers, they're all going together, and you think, wow, how can they do that? They're in tune on a different level. Or fish even swimming. Yeah, so things like that. A lot of stuff to think about. So as promised, we will have a little break here. Is that okay, Ron? All right. And we'll come back. And Ron, how long should we, 5 minutes or so? Or
5 is inhuman. Let's try and attempt to do it.
okay, I'm going to put my thing on mute, step away, grab a drink of water or whatever, and I'll be back in a few minutes. Hey, Ron, did you guys ever have Stephen Heller give a talk up at Portland?
No, we haven't. In my period of time, there are several others on the tube right now with you here that could answer and say whether we did. But let's say, Dana, could you help me out with, did we have Heller here? Wallace, did we have Heller here?
We did. I can answer that.
Thank you.
The last time Stephen came to us was when the Red Book came out, and he gave us a wonderful introductory talk on that. And he's also given us talks on the Gospel of Thomas, and there's others I can't bring to mind at this moment, but he has a long association with our lodge that went back into the 50s at least.
Oh, yeah, he's a wonderful man. I spoke to him a couple of days ago, and he told me he just turned 90 years old.
Wow.
He's not traveling much anymore. The last time I saw him at Alcott, he had to have some guys help him into the van because he's slowing down a lot. But he was so excited. He says, David, he says, I'm the first one in my family that reached 90 years of age. I said, congratulations. He's a very funny guy. If you had him in Portland, you know he has got a wicked sense of humor.
Yeah.
Wicked sense of humor.
When
I'm going to miss him
when
goes.
Stephen Heller came to Portland for the Red Book, which Betty talked about, was the only time that we maxed out. We couldn't allow people in because of the fire, the fire chief. We had a maximum occupancy.
Oh, yeah.
And I missed the whole thing because I had to sit out on the front and say, no, you can't come in. Sorry, you can't come in. We're maxed out.
Yeah. When I was living in Milwaukee, I would drive down to Wheaton to hear him at summer conventions, and the auditorium would be packed.
Mm-hmm.
He would pack it. And then every year he would go out to Pumpkin Hollow up in upper state New York. He was very popular there. He had a big following, but he started slowing down, as we all do as we get older. And but anyway, I was just, it's like you look back at all the people you have listened to in the Theosophical movement, and I feel blessed that I've been able to hear people like Stephen, Joy Mills, both of whom are no longer with us. I've had all these inspiring people to motivate me. Yeah, it's
I'll always remember the one summer convention, and it was the one on Blavatsky, and I was in the dining hall, and there was Stephen Heller and Michael Gomes and Mitch Horowitz and Ed Abdel. And they were just sitting at a table having a discussion, and it was like, oh my God, I'm in the presence of giants.
Stephen with 3 New Yorkers. Oh my God. Michael Gomes he's a funny guy. He's got a different sense of humor than Stephen, but he just cracks me up. Yeah. Well, I tell you, I've been recommending this study guide by John Elgin. That's from cover. You see that? You recognize that artwork? That's from the mural in our lobby. They took a photograph and we used that for the study guides. But again, I strongly recommend that from questbooks.net. I also would suggest that if you have a DVD player, if anybody still has those, the Henry Alcott Memorial Library has many DVDs of really good informative talks on the Secret Doctrine. And I would check out people like Joy Mills, Ed Abdel, John Elgio, of course, and of course Pablo. Pablo's probably one of the most prominent speakers right now. He's a young guy, and he's devoted, totally devoted. He knows a lot. So, All right, let's, you know what I want to do is just before we get back into this, I just want to step back a little bit and reframe this just to put the secret doctrine into perspective. As you know, Blavatsky was a voluminous writer, prodigious writer, and she wrote, she wrote different types of books for different purposes. Now, she actually wrote something that you would say is just a book for entertainment. Anybody know what that one might be? You will when I tell you the title, The Caves and Jungles of Hindustan. Yeah, Wallace, yeah. Now, she actually wrote a book that you could really call an instructional book. Many of you are familiar with it. That is, of course, The Key to Theosophy. That's a book of instruction. A book of inspiration would be The Voice of the Silence. So you got three categories there: entertainment, instruction, inspirational. The Secret Doctrine, I'm sorry, it doesn't fit into any of those categories. No, it doesn't. John Algill, a scholar and academic, he is, and knowing all the words in the dictionary, he called it a heuristic book. That's spelled heuristic is Heuristic. I had never heard that word in my life, and I read a lot until I came across it, that book, that word in here. And that basically, and John, there'd be a much simpler way of saying it, but John being John, he has to come up with a fancy word. Basically, heuristic means to discover. So the Secret Doctrine is a book of discovery, right? Remember I said it's an inner discovery, inner journey. And keep that in mind as you go through the pages of this book. I'm going to open up the screen again. I'm going to just recap something here. We were talking. Yeah, I've gone back now to, let me expand this here. There we go. So the first fundamental proposition, we went through that. And if we had been doing like a longer workshop, I would have you a printed copy for you, and I would say try to sum that up in 1 or 2 words. John sums it up in 1 word. That word is wholeness. Wholeness. Others have used the word unity. All right, so now going ahead to the second one. Second assertion, cycles, periodicity. John summed that up with the word order, meaning there is order to the cosmos. It's not a chaotic universe. It's an orderly universe with laws and so forth. Finally, the third one, which is actually a very long, there's a lot, I just showed you a part of it. It's too long to go over in a 2-hour presentation. Here, he summed this one up, I think, very aptly with the word purpose. In other words, it's a purposeful universe. There's purpose, therefore, to our lives. Every person, there's a reason, there's a purpose. And that's important because a lot of people have lost a sense of purpose in today's world. And that, by the way, I think is another reason why you want to study the Secret Doctrine, because it shows you a deeper insight into the universe, the cosmos, and also your place as a human being in that context. People often wonder about that. Is there a real purpose? And if they're not satisfied with what they hear in church, which is basically summed up as God has a plan for you, but okay, that's nice. Would somebody let me know what that plan is? Because I'd like to know. If he has a plan for me, I haven't got the memo yet. So basically, you have to find what that is, right? You have to discover it for yourself. So when you read the book like this and the ideas, if they make sense to you, you're going to have a whole different perspective on life that you won't, so you will feel a solid foundation. No matter what happens in the outer world, there can be chaos, turbulence, wars, riots, whatever. you're aware of it, but you have a sense of equilibrium. And also you have a sense of purpose, which you may not fully understand your purpose, but by degrees you gain a greater feeling, maybe through intuition. You come to realize this is my journey, this is where I need to go. And the Secret Doctrine can help you become it adds stability and a sense of confidence that you're not thrown off your game by all these things happening in the outer world, which sometimes can be very violent, very chaotic, and very troublesome for many people. All right, let's move ahead. Whoops, got to do this here first. We did that. Okay, here is a kind of a table of contents type of thing. Both volumes have what they're based on is what they have is stanzas, and then follows the commentaries on those stanzas. Volume 1 has 7 stanzas, Volume 2 has 12. So Blavatsky has commentaries. After you, on pages 27 to 34, you'll see in their entirety the stanzas with, we don't call them verses, they're shlokas, which is a Tibetan word. So each stanza has several shlokas, and you just read them without commentary. Then it really gets interesting because the first time you read it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You say, what is that all about? Then you go to the commentaries and wow. Not saying you're going to understand all that either, but there are some moments of excitement where the light bulb goes on, or things like, wow, I always kind of thought that, but I was never able to put it into words. So on and so forth. So you can see it on Volume 1, there's like, wow, roughly 230 pages of commentary. And then the summing up section, which is always good. That's kind of a recapitulation of what has gone. And the same thing, the same layout in Anthropogenesis. Cosmos, Genesis, you all know, is Genesis, like in the Bible, it's the beginning, it's the origin. So this is the beginning of the cosmos and the beginning of man. And of course, we don't believe in the straight line theory that the Western world has adopted. We look at the cyclical process. So there is a ongoing birth and decay, not only in living beings, but in the life of the system itself, the vast universe. So here we have, I'm going to just go through some of these stanzas here. This is stanza 1, where we have 7. I'm just going to give you the first, give you a little taste, if you haven't been familiar with this. The eternal parent, wrapped in her ever invisible robes, had slumbered once again for 7 eternities. Well, that's kind of interesting, but notice this. Notice the feminine polarity there. Where do we see that? Her, wrapped in her, not his, but her. It's feminine for a reason, because it's referring to these invisible robes, which is a poetic way of referring to the root source of matter, which to use a Sanskrit word is prakriti, or even the root source is mola prakriti. So you have that, the eternal parent, which is the cosmic womb or the source of the universe, that is parent because it gives birth to the universe. But what about this business with 7 eternities? Is that an oxymoron? Is that, what is that? I mean, what do you think? An eternity is not supposed to have a beginning and an end, right? Something that is eternal. There's no beginning. Otherwise, it's not eternal. And
sorry. In Christianity, we've been taught that eternity is equal to forever.
Well, yeah, that's I would agree with that. Eternity equals forever. Yeah, but here, the fact that you have 7 or assign a number to it, whether it's 34 or 2, if you have 7, that means the first one at some point must end and a new one starts, et cetera, right? You get my drift. So she goes on to explain in her commentary, let me open this back up again, that this is written again from an Eastern point of view, not a Western. She goes on to explain in this sentence, the word eternity does not mean the same thing that you, Jake, just alluded to, forever and ever, or what we normally think of as eternity. What it refers to here in the Secret Doctrine is an immense, unimaginably immense long period of time, which is therefore referred to as an eternity. And in the in Hinduism, they have this idea of Brahma breathing out the universe, the breath of Brahma, and then it's at the end, it's dissolved back in. The outgoing, the ebb and flow, the inflow. So in the Secret Doctrine, that manifestation of the universe, which is, we can't even imagine how long it is in terms of our concept of time, it's called a manvantara. And then after it reaches the end of that huge, unimaginably long cycle, it dissolves, it recedes back into the one, and then everything is like, it's like when you go to sleep, it's called pralaya. So you have that in the Secret Doctrine. Those concepts are introduced at various points. So that's what this 7, the sequence of 1 to 2, and these are huge. And she actually puts numbers to it, but I would take those with a grain of salt. So this, the title for this whole stanza is The Night of the Universe, meaning the pralaya. The universe is sleeping, just like you and I sleep at night. And we're oblivious, while we're sleeping, we're oblivious to the outer world, unless we ate too much pepperoni pizza and we wake up with indigestion. But then we're no longer sleeping, are we? So here in the cosmos, time was not. There is no time. Time was not, for it lay asleep in the infinite bosom of duration. Wow. That is one of those sentences you just have to savor it. You just have to love it and take it in. Time was not, for it lay asleep in the infinite bosom. That's kind of a feminine word there, the infinite bosom of duration. Now, time is an interesting thing. She talks about that, by the way, in the commentary. It's worth reading. But many years ago, I decided to read the Confessions of St. Augustine, because I like to read a lot of different things from different religious traditions. Anyway, in that book, the Confessions of Augustine, there's a chapter in there, or a section of a chapter, where he goes on for several pages about time. What is time? This is like in the 2nd century, almost 2000. St. Augustine, man, that guy was really, wow, he was an intellect to reckon with. He talks about time, past. What does it mean? Past, present, future. And there's a passage in there, Blavatsky talks kind of in the same vein. And you read Augustine, if you thought you knew what time was, you read Augustine, it's kind of metaphysical, actually. You suddenly wonder if you really understand what time is. So I would encourage you, if you have a lot of free time, dig that book up, Confessions of St. Augustine. So here, time was not, because you have to have motion. Think about it. You have to have motion for time. We measure time on this planet. How do we measure it? By the revolutions of this planet on its axis, which is about 24 hours. We measure the revolving around the sun in terms of days. It's about 365 and a little fraction. But for all of that, motion needs to take place. Without motion, think about it, how can you have time without motion? And then you have this other concept of duration. Duration. Very interesting. She means she's alluding to certain things. And then universal mind, again, this is the night, the universe is asleep in Pralaya. Universal mind, they talk about God consciousness or the mind of God. Universal mind was not, for there were no celestial beings to contain it. Even if you go back to the early days of Christianity, they talked about the angelic host and the archangels. Not so much, occasionally I'll turn on one of these televangelists just to see what they're talking about. I'm not too impressed generally. This is my opinion now, not speaking for anybody else. And I don't want to offend anybody, but I think some of the deepest minds in the Christian tradition wrote stuff long time ago, starting with Augustine, and they were deep thinkers. And even in modern times, like C.S. Lewis, who was a Christian apologist, some of his writings are really deep. And you turn on today, though, with these mega churches, and you got thousands of people in there. I don't know how to say it, except that to me, it seems like they've dumbed down the teachings for the masses. It's really simple stuff that they present, and it's all all you have to be is like a charismatic person, know how to speak, good rhetoric, good speaking skills, with a little flair for the dramatic.
Wrapped in sensationalism.
Sensationalism, yes, sir. But you won't have the deep probing thought, maybe here and there, but if you had that kind of a presentation in a mega church, you'd have a few hundred people in there. It's like the McDonald's and Burger Kings of religion. And I think people that gravitate to the Theosophical Society already have a predilection for deeper thought, because we were led in this direction because we had that affinity for deeper thought, for depth, not superficiality. So, once in a while I tune in and I go, oh my God, oh my goodness. But anyway, everybody's at a different place, it takes time.
I think to add, it's like when we were talking earlier about, talking or teaching people in a form of parable versus teaching people in an inner way. And everybody's at a different level of teaching. So maybe to not bash on the congregations, but maybe they're in a stage where, like a practical teaching of something true.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Yeah, totally agree. If you look at the Bible, which I've read several times and I go back to occasionally, there's a lot of stories in there. There are allegories, there are metaphors, there are parables. And I think intelligent Christians realize that and understand them for what they are. An allegory is not something that actually happened, but it's a story that illustrates a living truth. There's a truth behind it. But, my sister, bless her heart, I love her, she's my sister, but I think she kind of literally believes some of these Bible stories that they literally happened. Like the one where, what was it? Somebody stopped the sun in its tracks. I forget what, Isaiah, I think it's in there, where Joshua, I think, stop the sun. Well, in order to stop the sun, if that were possible, that means the earth had to stop rotating on its axis. If that were even possible, you'd have the hugest tidal wave, tsunami. The whole planet on the surface would be utterly destroyed. Yeah, so,
Unless the sun went into retrograde.
I poke fun at that, but I will never poke fun at an individual face to face, because I feel, to me, that's silly to believe it. But if it helps them get through life and if it's important to them, I am not going to denigrate them and say, bless you, brother. But I certainly won't share my ideas because I know they're not ready for it. But there's so much in religious scriptures, not just Christian scriptures, but there's a lot of metaphor and myth. And those are important because they appeal to the higher senses, the intuitive faculties, and they arouse our higher states of consciousness. Whereas if you just read something that's pedantic, like, in the year 1700, Napoleon's army marched through Europe and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's just fact, statistics. It's interesting, but it doesn't arouse anything up here in your higher consciousness. It's just, oh, that's interesting to know that Julius Caesar marched into Gaul, which is now France, and blah, blah, blah. But the stories are important because people can relate to them. And when the Bible was written, and for many centuries after, most people were illiterate. They didn't know how to read. That was the province of people who were privileged, but people could remember stories, and they could share those with their children and tell them and share and teach the lessons. These all have lessons. But if you take it literally, you're missing a lot. That's all you're missing a lot. There's a lot in the Bible and other scriptures, but you should not just read it literally. There's very few parts of it, I think, that you should read. Some of it, yes, some of it is. But then we get into a whole different topic here. But all the scriptures use symbolic language. That's the word. That kind of covers all the bases. Symbolic language, very important. Symbolism. Share video. So we go back here. All right, this is the fourth shloka. The seven, there's that number 7 again. The 7 ways to bliss were not. The great causes of misery. That sounds like a Buddhist idea there. What are the causes of misery? The great causes of misery were not. For there was no one to produce them and get ensnared by them. Oops. The next one here. Darkness alone. Hey, remember Genesis? Darkness was on the face of the deep, right? The opening passages, it was dark. Before in Genesis, before there was light, there was darkness. Darkness alone, so there's a parallel there is what I'm saying. Darkness alone filled the boundless all. For Father, Mother, and Son, that's what? That's 3. That's a Trinity. 1, 2, 3. Father, Mother, Son. Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Father, Mother, and Son were once more one. And the Son had not yet awakened for the new wheel and his pilgrimage thereon. That wheel refers to the cycle. Hinduism has its Trinity too. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. A lot of religions, the ancient Egyptian, they have a Trinity. There's a reason for that, which if you delve into books like The Secret Doctrine, at some point you're going to realize that's a universal things. The names are different. If you go to my sister's church, it's the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. But there are certain realities that when we, as human beings, based on our culture and our background, we'll assign different terms to them. The 7, there's that number again. Okay, let me just stop here a second. Remember the 3, we had that Trinity. I'm going to hit this 7 thing here. If you wonder why 7, and it comes up in later in the one of the shlokas or one of the stanzas, the number 7. But it's kind of a much simpler explanation. Have you heard of Ernest Wood?
Oh, yeah.
Or Jeffrey Hodson?
Yes.
Ernest Wood wrote a book called, pardon me? Yeah. The 7 Rays, still in publication, Ernest Wood, the 7 Rays. In the first chapter, when he talks about the individual rays 1 through 7, he gives a little theoretical basis talking about how 3 leads to 7. Jeffrey Hodson, I believe, yes, he does the same thing. His book, though, is called The 7 Human Temperaments. And I'm going to try to fumble through this because I wasn't prepared. This just kind of came to me. But you can, we're talking symbolism now. The Trinity, you can represent that by what? A triangle. 1, 2, 3. So you have 3 points. Then you have the interrelationships between them. The relationship, let's call the apex A, and then down here B, and then C. So you have the relationship of the bottom B and C to A, C and A to B, and A and B to C. So you have, and then you add, and then you have all of them together and you come up with 7. And that's as the universe manifests. It's a game of numbers. Pythagoras made the statement at his school in Crotona to his disciples that he said the universe is built on numbers. And the Pythagoreans, as some of you know, they spent a great deal on mathematics, talking about odd shapes and things like that. And there's a lot of that later in the Secret Doctrine, talking about these cubes and odd-shaped geometrical figures. So 7, 3, there's a reason for it. It's not just that HPB plucked that number out of the air, out of thin air. So the 7 sublime lords and the 7 truths had ceased to be, and the universe, the sun of necessity, was immersed in supreme bliss. To be breathed, to be outbreathed, there's that outgoing breath of Brahma, by that which is and yet is not. Not was. Not was, wonderful way of stating that there was nothing manifested at this point, or at this stage, not a point, but at this stage. Nothing has been manifested. Everything has come back to the source. The causes, and by the way, the reason we don't use the word God in theosophical literature, because it carries too much baggage, too many anthropomorphical associations with that term. That's why. The causes of existence had been done away with. The visible that was and the invisible that is rested in eternal non-being, which means non-manifestation, one being. And finally, I think this is last, not quite, alone, the one form of existence, stretched boundless, infinite. That takes you back to that first fundamental proposition, right? Causeless. Sometimes she refers to that ultimate principle as the causeless cause. You know, or remember that phrase, the rootless root? Same thing. The causeless cause, the rootless root. Buddhists are famous. They have this chain of, what the heck is it called? Causation, chain of causation, tracing things back. But at some point, you have to say, what was the original? You can't keep going back ad infinitum. There has to be a starting point. So anyway, at this point, life is pulsating, unconscious in universal space. Throughout that all presence, omnipresence, which is sensed by the opened eye of the purified soul. The opened eye is referring to a higher, not a physical eye, but a spiritual eye that senses the divine presence, which is omnipresent everywhere. Everywhere. There is no place that that presence is not. But, and then if I think this is the final, and it wraps it up here in kind of a dramatic little sense. But where was the purified soul when the store soul of the universe was in absolute reality and the great wheel was parentless? So it's like ending with a question which leads you on to stanza 2. And then, and each one of these 9 shlokas in stanza 1 has wonderful commentary. Some of it you'll understand right away, and some of it you will not. Now, I'm just going to go through the 7 stanzas. We just did, these are the titles she assigns to these. We did the night of the universe, the idea of pralaya. Then the idea of differentiation. Somebody's trying to ask me a question. Okay, I hear some sound there. The idea of differentiation, because that has to come first. If you have unity, wholeness, and there's no differentiation, then that process has to begin. Then you have the awakening of cosmos. And then the 7 here, that's where she gets into the numbers. I'm pretty sure it's in shloka 4, the commentaries to that. Then Fohat, That's where Pablo got the name of his production company. So on and so forth. So there's a lot there. And then, of course, volume 2 has, there we go, we stopped that. So if you get into this, folks, it is, it can seem like a maze. It can seem like a labyrinth, but it's worth it because follow the steps that John Algeo put. Start with the 3 fundamental propositions, then go to the summing up. And then he has some other suggestions in the study guide, which I highly recommend. It'll help give some clarity and direction, sense of direction. It's easy to stray and get lost in the under all the weeds, all this minutia, which are not the main points. Those are meant to illustrate the primary points. You want to find the seminal ideas, the key ideas, and all that other stuff. You can get lost in it. It's like when you're reading an article on the computer and you got all these little things popping up on the side. You go, oh, that looks interesting. And pretty soon you're way off somewhere and you forgot where you were. That can happen here too. You can really get lost. But as I said, there's no other book like it. Not an easy book. It's the greatest theosophical book. I think others have said that in our literature. We have a lot of great books. It's the greatest book she ever wrote. And it's worth making an acquaintance with it. But it's going to be a long friendship. It's not going to be an instant deja vu. It's going to be one of those friendships you develop over time. And so there's going to have to be a little trust built up on your part, because some of it will just seem maybe bizarre or so unreal. So think of it as a relationship, and that you're going to build this long-term relationship. But if you do that, the ideas, the teachings in this book will be a friend guiding you through life, supporting you, being there to support you, give you confidence, even courage, and help you to take a detached view when the outer world around you is going to hell. You look at all that stuff in certain periods of history. We seem to be in one right now. There are periods of history where everything is calm, but then there, if you look at your history, there are times of turbulence and all kinds of things happen. It takes a strong person to hold to the center and not get thrown off their game during those turbulent times, and give in to fear and anxiety, which is not good for your health. So you got to keep the light in front of you. You got to keep that higher consciousness going by frequently visiting books like this and The Voice of the Silence, and meditating, having periods of quiet, turning off all the outer stimuli, the TV or whatever, the computer, your cell phone, turn it off for a while. Maybe go on a cell phone fast for a day. Shut the damn thing off. And don't look at anything for a day. Do it on a day when you're going to say, you know what, I'm going to turn off the outer world for a day. It'll still be there tomorrow. I'm going to have a quiet day. I'm going to sit down with a cup of tea and I'm going to read something inspiring or illuminating. And keep doing that, because a lot of people do not do that. They're bouncing around like balls in a pinball machine. They're, oh my God, oh no. They're like a emotional roller coaster, and they're not in control, and that bothers them because they know they're not in control. You got to have your sense of you got to be grounded in spiritual truths. And like my sister said, you got to be grounded in the Lord or divine. We don't use that word here so much, but you know what I'm saying. Because if you're just grounded in ephemeral, it's like building a house on sand. It's going to come collapsing down. Or another metaphor, you're like a boat on the ocean without a rudder. Remember that metaphor? I think it's in Matthew. I think it's also in Luke from the New Testament, where Jesus had just completed his preaching to the masses, And he got into this large boat with the disciples on the Sea of Galilee. They went out in the boat on the sea. And before long, Jesus was tired. He took a little nap. And suddenly the weather changed. The wind picked up. The skies grew dark. The waves are getting larger and the boat is rocking, lightning, and the disciples are getting more and more fearful. They're getting frightened. And finally they say, Master, wake up, wake up. They thought they were going to perish, drown in the middle of the sea. And I forget the exact phrasing from the story, but basically he said, peace, be still. And the storm vanished. And all was well. Now, people like my sister, bless her heart, you know, that's a Southern phrase, bless her heart. You know what they mean? If you're from the South, you know what bless her heart means. She probably, I never asked her, but I'm guessing she probably takes that literally. It was a miracle that Jesus performed. It says so in the Bible. So, you know, it says so. So it has to, but if she understood allegories and metaphors, she would therefore take a different look at it and understand that Jesus there understood or represented the higher self. The disciples represented all the aspects of our lower personality. And the sea was the sea of life, which can be turbulent at times. And if you respond to that and react to that, if you let life push your buttons, jerk you around like a little marionette, nah, not good. Not good at all. But if you tune into the higher source, the Christ consciousness, that's when the sea, the outer world, becomes calm. Yeah, actually, there's still stuff going on out there, but it's not affecting you because you've learned to remain calm. And you can say, this too shall pass, like it says, I think in one of the Psalms or the Proverbs, this too shall pass. The Secret Doctrine will give you that long-term perspective. Long-term perspective. So little things that happen in this incarnation or this 100 years or this century, you put it in a wider perspective and it doesn't bother you quite as much. You're not oblivious to it. You understand that people may be suffering and you do what you can to help people find peace, but you can't let it affect you because if you're in turmoil, you can't help anybody. You know, if you're a surgeon with the shakes, you better not perform surgery, right? That's why when a murder is done and a detective knows the victim, they don't put that detective on interrogating because he's got a personal stake in it. So you have to be detached. And you can help other people, but you have to have some measure of peace within before you can help people who are unpeaceful. I had a guy in the gym this morning. I went in for my workout, and this guy started talking to me. I don't know who he was, out of nowhere. And I quickly realized he was very upset. He said he hadn't slept much because he's going through a divorce. I went through a divorce, so I know how that can be many years ago. So I thought, you know, the best thing I can do is just sit quietly and listen to him. So I just let him, I didn't try to take part in the conversation. I go, oh yeah, that kind of, you know, real brief. And I think it helped him just to get it off his chest that somebody would listen to him. So, you know, I could not have done that if I had been upset myself. You know, if I was nervous and agitated, I couldn't help the guy. I don't know how much I helped him. In the moment, I think I did. I think I helped him relieve some of his anxiety. But the point is, you have to realize some of these things within yourself and mold and shape yourself so that you're in a position to help others. So I think, Ron, are you still there, Ron? I will turn it over to you if we have questions or comments. Be happy to respond.
All right. Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. Questions and comments are always interesting. And the theme that we operate on is that we have recorded this and we'll be placing it on our website for you so that you'll be able to get into it, view it again if you want to, get the copy of the important essential slides that you really liked that David gave you today. It's very good for you to have that. Again, Pablo Sender's book is available through Quest Books back at our National Center, and you'll be able to find a lot of references to anchor this down. But if you have one little floaty right now that you haven't been able to anchor down really well, David might be able to answer it for you exactly. So you'll have to come off mute if you have a question, and I'll be glad to facilitate the discussion for you. Anybody appearing here that wants to speak up?
I have a comment about the numbers. I played around with something fun called Gematria, Gematria, which is sacred numbers. And I noticed that she's using a lot of 7s and 3s, and the Bible's full of 12s and 9s and all these numbers. Well, 7 correlates simply to the creation of the world, and 3 correlates to completeness. So there's another way of looking at those stanzas too, with that in mind. I just thought I'd bring that up. Not too many people know about it.
That geometria, I remember hearing Doss McDavid from San Antonio Lodge giving a lecture years ago at one of our summer conventions. He's really into that. Yeah, there's a lot to numbers.
So, thank you, Sheila, and thank you, David. And I'll close here now. I've got a couple of comments for you that are important to us. One, very, very specifically, David, thank you. Thank you ever so much for supporting the Portland Lodge. You've been an advocate for years, and we appreciate your presence back at the National Center, so that you've facilitated much of our growth and development here in the Theosophical Association here in the United States. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you. It just occurred to me, there's 2 other books I'd like to recommend real quickly. Pablo's is very good, but some people might find even Pablo's book a little bit difficult. I'd like to recommend one that's somewhat easier. The Secret Gateway by Ed Abdel. That's a good one. The Secret Gateway, published by Quest Books. That'll help you approach the Secret Doctrine. But for those of you that have been in it already, you've heard of this book by Jeffrey Barborka, The Divine Plan. That's a very difficult book. But what he does in that book, he approaches the teachings from the standpoint of doctrines. You look in the table of contents, doctrines, and then each doctrine has divine laws exemplifying that doctrine. So that's really for advanced. When I went through that book for the first time, I took a long time, probably 14 months to get through it, because I was going very slowly, trying my best to understand. But that's quite a work. But Secret Gateways, anyway, my last comment, Secret Gateway by Ed Abdel's a really good introductory book.
Very cool. Hey, this is it for the month of December, folks. We will not have another public presentation. Dave took care of our 2 per month goal and dream. So thank you, David, for your kindness here on Saturday and Sunday, both with the workshop. Let's take a next opportunity is Claire Goldsberry. She's going to be with us on the 9th of January. And what Claire did that got my attention is I solicit for people here in the neighborhood to come and help us. She said, "It sounds great. I'd be glad to do a Zoom presentation for your group. I've long said that I believe HPB would be jumping up and down with excitement when quantum physics came into the picture if she were still around." So Claire's going to be presenting quantum Buddhism for us on the 9th of January. Attend that one. It'll get your head spinning, because she's going to present algorithms, ideas, laws, and she's going to contrast the present culture and the civilization that we're in and our troubles, and try to show that we have an emerging trend that's really cool here, and it falls right into the Secret Doctrine's predictions. So this is very, very cool. Then we get the real big benefit at the end of January. David's coming back. He's going to help us with
I am.
knowledge and wisdom, and it's a big new deal. You won't have seen him do this. It's only been for the the folks on the other side of the continent over there. So David, thanks for bringing it out here first in Oregon, and that's on January 23rd. So there, January 9 and January 23. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Wallace. Wallace, I got the public part done. We got the Theosophical Society in Portland to represent here. Anything you want to say?
I would just want to say that any of you that are from out of the area, you're welcome to join us on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific time for our members meetings. Right now we're studying, what are we studying? Ibn Alexander's second book, The Map of Heaven, which is really good. And next we're going to look at The Voice in the Silence from Joy Mill's perspective. We have books there, and I'm hoping we can bring in the Besant and Leadbeater commentary on The Voice of the Silence and have an in-depth study of that. So you're all welcome. Contact Ron.
Well, thank you, sir. Okay, everybody, thanks very, very much. Have a very excellent holiday season, and in the final blush, we'll see you next year.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Happy holiday.
Yeah, thank you very much.